Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. Can you name that tune?
Uh-oh, choppers.
MASH is my all-time favorite TV show. I've seen every episode more times than I can count. So I think you can see where this is going. That's right, we are building a MASH-inspired diorama. More specifically, we're going to build the swamp, complete with everyone's favorite martini drinking, hijacks creating, prank playing meatball surgeon, Benjamin Franklin Pierce, better known as Hawkeye. If you've never seen or heard of MASH, well, go find it and watch it. Wait, hold on, slow down. Go watch it after you finish this video. I was lucky enough to find the original blueprints that they used when designing the set for the TV show, so that allowed me to make a pretty accurate model. But first, I had to figure out a scale because 1:1 scale wouldn't fit in my hobby room. So I decided to go with 1:48 scale. Since I work in millimeters, that means one real-life foot would be 6.35 millimeters. This is often referred to as O scale in the model railroad world. I crunched all the numbers, carried the 1, and then remembered how pointless all that calculus and trigonometry really was in school. After getting over being lied to by my teachers, my calculations were complete, and then I mostly winged it anyhow. I got him to cut me a hunk of MDF on the table saw for the base. I first sanded the edges smooth and removed the sharp corners. Next up is a little rattle can primer. While this build isn't about 3D printed bits, I do have a few support pieces that I created and 3D printed, so I'll go ahead and airbrush a little primer on those. This teeny little rotary tool is great for removing the 3D printed supports. Let me lay out all of my printed support bits. And show you my tongue. I marked the center of my MDF base, since this is where the actual tent will go. Now I need to assemble the tent frame. I 3D printed walls for the tent structure and will later put fabric over these walls. It's actually how the real tent would have been made, only they would use 2x4s instead of 3D printed plastic. It's just a matter of a little super glue to hold the walls together. And then you have yourself a tent frame. Voila! I'm centering the tent on the MDF and then marking an outline so I know where it goes later. Even Hot Lips and Frank Burns would be proud of the attention to detail here. Time for a test run of the 3D printed parts to make sure it's all going to flow like I want. This base needs a hole in it so I can pop a battery pack inside the tent. More on that later. A hole saw makes quick work of this. Oh, hey there. Time to paint some bits. First up is the map sign post thing they had. It was a wooden pole with some directional signs nailed to it. Not exactly army issue stuff. The signs would show the distance to various homes of the MASH residents, probably a fun little way to stay connected with their hometowns while so far away. After all, nothing says home sweet home like knowing you're 6,448 miles from Toledo, Ohio. This little piece is a stovepipe that sticks out of the tent. Winters in Korea were freezing cold, and the only thing keeping them warm was a fire that they had to keep going inside the tent. Moving on to the lamppost outside the swamp, it gets a little brown paint to make it look like wood. I have a super tiny LED that will go on here as well, so I actually put a groove in the pole where I'll hide the wires. More on that later. But now it's time to work on the front door, since we need something to slam when Frank Burns drives us nuts. I really love 3D printing, but I also want to try some scratch building, so this door will be scratch built to give it a very rustic feel, just like the real one. Incoming! I'll never understand the people who poo-poo on 3D printing diorama parts, but I also really enjoy working with my hands and making stuff from scratch. I'm just using coffee stir sticks and some tacky glue. It's kind of a slow process, but pretty easy to trim with scissors, test fit, trim some more, and then glue into place. And there you have it, a rustic door. A little thinned down brown paint sells the look. I drew a little box shape, which I'll paint for a window. And then there's this little, I don't know, upside down anchor looking thing they had on the door. Do you know what that symbol is? I didn't either. I had to look it up, even with all of my extensive MASH knowledge. So, it is actually a cross that is an ancient Moorish symbol that brings good luck and wards off evil. You learn something new every day. Tell me what you thought it was in the comments. The point is, I designed and 3D printed one, so it's there, true to the show. I also designed and 3D printed the word swamp and painted each letter in red, then applied them to the door with tweezers. After all, it wouldn't be the swamp without the word swamp. And like that, the world's most iconic front door is done. What do you think? Outside the swamp are 2 wooden chairs where the doctors would sit and enjoy their homemade martinis. These were clearly some DIY style chairs, likely made from shipping pallets, crates, or whatever surplus wood they could get their hands on. And so to say they are rustic is an understatement. So this is another chance for me to work on my scratch building skills. I'll use wooden coffee stir sticks again and trim them down to scale lumber with my hobby knife. From there, it's just some tacky glue, tweezers, and a whole lot of patience. I didn't really have any plans for these, just sort of winging it to see how it would turn out. The first one is a sort of Adirondack chair style, I guess. And I'm really happy with how it turned out, actually. The second chair is made the same way, but this one is a little different looking. Looks more like a crate that was turned into a makeshift chair. But the process is the same, trimming down those wooden coffee stir sticks and getting the tweezers and tacky glue and just start building. Ah, that tacky glue really is tacky. I was trying to assemble this all in one go, but it didn't quite work out, so I had to sort of break it apart halfway through. Thankfully, I found it was easier to make 2 halves and then glue it together. I'm happy I didn't break it, because I'd have to start all over again, and ugh. More of that diluted brown paint, and we have a chair that is perfect for relaxing in after a long day in the OR. Now we need to work on Hawkeye, the show's most iconic character by far. In fact, he was the one and only character to appear in every single episode of MASH. The Searchins had a makeshift still in their tent so they could make their adult beverages to help ease the horrors of war. Today we'd call this a drinking problem, but back then, well, it was a simpler time. So how does one make a Hawkeye model like you see here? Well, my sculpting skills don't exist yet. And my 3D modeling skills are nowhere near that good. So I turned to a site called Hero Forge. It's big with all those nerdy tabletop gamer types and allows you to make all sorts of 3D characters, so I made my own Hawkeye. I went for a classic Hawkeye look with army boots, a robe, a cowboy hat, and a plunger in his hand. Amazingly, all options to pick from on Hero Forge. I think that the plunger is very random, but it was a trophy awarded to Hawkeye. I couldn't find a martini glass, so I chose a wine glass, then modeled my own martini glass out of it and pasted that in my 3D modeling software and printed it out. The only downside to Hero Forge is that it isn't free. I think this cost around $8 to download. Fair enough, no biggie. I got him all painted, and here's how he looks. I love it. What do you think? Alright, we need to get back to the base. The area where the swamp sits is pretty flat, mostly just dirt or mud depending on the time of year. So there was no need to create hills or anything like that. But I wanted some texture because glass smooth MDF wouldn't be right here either. I decided to try some of this modeling paste by painting it on to give various little ridges and patterns like a well-worn dirt area. I dragged a popsicle stick through it to create some tire patterns from the last Jeep that drove by. Once the paste was dry, I painted on a brown base coat. After that dried, I painted on a few other different brown shades and a black wash over it. I was just going for a sort of dirty and muddy ground look, and it came out okay. While the base dries, let's go back to the sign map location post thing I mentioned before. Using coffee stir sticks painted with diluted brown paint, I wrote a few locations on several pieces. I really couldn't fit the distance because it's super tight. I super glued them all into place and the signpost was done. Isn't it adorable? I think it turned out really cool. Very proud of this one. Let's get back to the lamppost now, because no swamp is complete without the famous lamppost out front. How else would the gang find their way back from Rosie's bar at 2 a.m.? It needs a bit more paint, so I'll get that on first. Then I need to wire it up with a tiny little nano LED. The LED wires fit in the groove I printed out as part of the lamp pole. So I put the LED in place and then used super glue in the groove and some tweezers to push the wires into the groove. At some point I realized it would be easier if the wires were twisted together so I would only be fighting one wire instead of two. And I just kept working my way down. I then used some more of that modeling paste I used on the MDF base to cover the wires. And once it was dry, I just painted some more brown over it. This worked really well, so if you need to hide tiny wires, a groove might be easier than fishing them through a hole. I'm very new to soldering, so it took me way too long to figure out why the solder wouldn't melt here. Yeah, it helps when the power strip is turned on. Duh. Alright, power on. Soldering iron is hot. Time to solder. The big tip on soldering is to put the heat shrink tubing on first. Otherwise, you get to cut it apart and do it all over again. Woo! I'm not here to give you soldering advice though, so just know I got it all soldered together and popped out my little torch to shrink the heat shrink tubing that covers the solder joint. Electric tape would work here too, but this is way more fun. A quick test, and it works! Moving on to the part I was dreading, the canvas tent. I had no real plan for this, then an old t-shirt fell into my lap, and I realized that it would be perfect for the tent canvas. My shirt is white, but I'll paint it later. If there was going to be an area where you would see the edge of the fabric, I applied some glue and folded those over. And then I realized you might see some of the black plastic tent frame and decided a quick coat of brown would look better since the real tents were made of wood. The rest was easier than expected, cutting up bits of fabric and gluing them onto the frame. The sides were actually pretty easy to install. For the top of the tent, I used the natural seam in the shirt to add some detail. Turning the fabric upside down, I glue and folded the edge so you won't see any frayed edges on the final tent. Then a little nip here and a tuck there and some glue, and it was all attached. Off camera, I used an airbrush to spray on a lovely army green color, and I think it turned out pretty good, as you'll see after I hot glued the light on the side. I think Hawkeye would be proud, and if you know Alan Alda, please direct him my way, as I would be happy to gift him the finished diorama. This is the best part of the diorama build, watching it all come together in final assembly. Now is a good time to do a proper test fit of the tent on the base with the battery to make sure I really would be able to get it out for a battery change as needed. Then we need to get that door glued in place. I cut a popsicle stick in half and hot glued it behind the door frame, and then hot glued the door to that popsicle stick. Come on, it's so cute, right? The swamp has a bunch of boulders placed all around it, so the scale version of this would be pebbles, or in my case, asphalt millings from my driveway. I painted them all white first and let them sit to dry for a bit. While those are drying, I'll paint the edges of my base in black so it's a nice, clean, finished look. My rocks were mostly dry, so time to hit them all with some gray as well. I'm not covering them entirely, just a quick hit with the grays so you get a sort of white and gray marbled look to keep things random. And now you will watch me place each and every single little rock by hand. Mwahaha! See, I wasn't joking. Next I'll place this tiny box totally out of camera view. There we go, looks great, right? Chair number 1 gets glued in place, and then chair number 2. And another crate box thing glued in place perfectly blocked by the light pole. I am such a video pro. Can't forget that location distance sign I spent way too long on. And finally, the most important thing, my absolute favorite gin distilling, martini drinking meatball surgeon, Hawkeye. And now the final result. I'm pretty proud of this mash build. I really love how it turned out. Hawkeye with his dreamy blue eyes standing proudly out front of the swamp. Let me know what you think. And again, should you happen to run into Alan Alda, say hey, I've got a video for you to watch. And a girl I think you should meet. She's your #1 fan. Thanks for watching, everyone.